Hi everyone, just getting set up. Okay, there we go. Say hi if you're live. Hashtag replay if you're catching the replay. This will end up being a podcast episode as well. Just gonna give it a moment. Hi Marco. Oh, so I didn't have a moment to settle in a little bit before we got started. I do like to take a couple of breaths as we're getting started so that we can kind of do it collectively, or if you're catching the replay, you can still obviously participate. Just treat it as if you're live, pop in questions, comments as if you're watching it live, and I'll see the notification so then I can circle back to it. I promise you, I sound worse than I am. Look at my nose. It's so red. So it was funny. I recorded a podcast last week and then the next morning got this fever. I did this really deep transformative counseling session with a coach that I've been working with, and I just feel like my body just gave this purge after. I don't know, it sounds funny, but after you if you do counseling and stuff and you have a very emotional session and you feel like a release, and the next day you might feel lethargic and stuff, and sometimes they'll say drink lots of water, get lots of rest. It's like your body's way of processing it. Well, I just worked through 13 years of things, so I think there was a whole lot to come up and out that was more than sleep, that required sleeping and drinking water. So I'm also run down, so I have a cold, but I'm doing okay. I did have the thought to put cover up on my nose, and I was like, you know what, that's not who I am. I show up raw and real, no pun intended, but that would have been terribly painful to put stuff because my nose is I've been blowing it a lot, and I had postnatal drip start this afternoon. It's been driving me a little crazy. So hopefully I'm not coughing or needing to blow my nose over the next hour. Fingers crossed. And I thank you for your patience. I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we're going to take a few deep breaths, and we're just going to kind of settle in, and we're going to chat about boundaries tonight. It's a big, amazing topic. I can't wait. All right. So as always, we're going to take 4 nice deep breaths. I encourage you, if you need a little extra support, 1 or 2 hands over your heart. You could put one on your belly. And if you want some really deep, nourishing breaths, breathe into your stomach first, into your belly, and then finish the breath in your lungs. That gives the full somatic experience. Do it at your own pace. And like I always say, just make sure that the exhale is longer than the inhale. That signals to your body that you're safe and it can settle into that rest and digest parasympathetic state. So we'll take a few deep breaths together. You can hold it at the top if you want. You can breathe out your nose or your mouth. Close your eyes or keep them open, whatever feels most comfortable for you. Two more. And last one. All right. Let me know how you feel. Hi, Allison. I think doing this, like, I really can't stress the importance enough of breath work, and just when we're feeling activated and stressed, just coming back to our breath. Not only is it changing the signals in our body, but it's bringing us back to that present moment and kind of making our worries, at least in that moment, irrelevant. Okay, let's get started. We're a little bit behind. So today's topic, I named the masterclass Speak Up. We're going to talk about what boundaries are. This is a heavy hitter. So even before we like really dive in, I'd like you to take a moment and just, because if you're watching this, I want you to give yourself a big hug. Just give yourself a hug for showing up, for being open to this, because some of these subjects that we talk about, they're heavy hitters, right? The things that transform us and move us into like the next level of ourselves and into growth and expansion, it's not without resistance and fear. So I just want to recognize that and, take inventory of that. So big hug for yourself. I'm sending you big hugs too. And I'm proud of you for being here. So I have a few kind of talking points. As always, I always look for a definition. That's that logical brain side of me. So what are boundaries? If we look in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent, right? If we think of it in a physical way, you could have like fences, but we're going to talk about it in more of like a metaphorical way, right? The limits that we set in our lives. There's 3 ways we can have boundaries. Is that the way I want to say it? 3 kind of classifications. The first one, we can have porous boundaries. So you think of, when I think of porous, I think of stones that are porous, right? Like have holes or the water can run through it. We can have rigid boundaries. It's like a very strong standing structure that does not like to be disturbed. And we can have healthy boundaries. We're going to break them down a little bit. Sorry, I apologize in advance if I have to like mute to blow my nose or anything. I'm hoping we're good. I might, excuse me, have to take some drinks of water. So in terms of porous boundaries, these are when it can be described as like unhealthy closeness. So that can look like oversharing, codependency, enmeshment, like when we get really enmeshed with others, the inability to say no. Remember our last masterclass, people pleasing? This is where people pleasing comes in. They're porous boundaries. They've got holes in them and they're not structured. We can have a dependency on feedback from others, right? We're looking outside of ourselves for that validation. We can have a paralyzing fear of being rejected. That would cause us to have porous boundaries. And accepting mistreatment. We're not standing up for ourselves. Our boundaries have holes in them, right? I'll keep peeking at the comments. I've got the phone kind of over on the side. So if you see me looking up, I'm looking over there. The next one we're going to talk about is rigid boundaries. So when you think of not allowing flexibility, that's the first thing I think of. This would be building distance between ourselves and others, whatever we're placing boundaries with or on. This can look like never sharing. So we're not vulnerable. We don't share pieces of ourselves. We build walls. We can cut people out, right? If they don't meet our expectations, we just cut them out. Having high expectations of others and enforcing strict rules. So this is when we don't have that flexibility in our boundaries. It's like my way or the highway. Those are those rigid boundaries. And lastly, healthy boundaries. We definitely want to talk about what healthy boundaries are. Healthy boundaries are possible when our past does not show up in our present interactions. In other words, and this kind of gives a little lead up to our next masterclass, when we're not triggered, right? The past, there's not something from our past that's triggering us, because triggers are, we're not triggered for no reason, right? Sometimes we don't even know the root of it. We often don't, right? Because it can be part of our conditioning, our subconscious conditioning. We've talked about that too. But healthy boundaries look like being clear about our values, knowing our values, and being clear about them. This plays into authenticity. The more we know ourselves, the more we build that self-worth, that self-love, the more we establish, understand, and then can speak up about our boundaries or what our values are. And we build our boundaries around those values. Healthy boundaries can, it can look like listening to others' opinions or others listening to our opinion. If other people respect our boundaries, they'll listen to us, and vice versa. Sharing appropriately. Big one here coming up. Comfortable saying no. That's kind of where we start, right? We have to be able to say no in order to create boundaries. A couple others. Healthy vulnerability with those who have earned your trust. So you're not just oversharing with anyone who will listen to you. It's not porous. It's healthy in that you feel safe. Your nervous system, your body feels safe divulging information. You feel safe to be vulnerable. That's when you know you have a healthy boundary with that person. You know that what you're telling them is safe with them. They're not going to go spread it around, right? And the last one, comfortable hearing no and not taking it personally. If someone tells you no and sets a boundary, and you know that it's not, we're going to get into this, but it's not just like a false alarm. It's like you can tell when someone is setting a boundary from a healthy place, because it is what it is, right? It's like, this is where I stand. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. And this is where I draw the line. This is where the line is. And there's no drama around it, right? We understand our values. We know where our boundaries are. And when someone tries to push them, we say, no, this is where the boundary is. And when we can respect people's boundaries, that's a wonderful thing. All right, let's chat about some. Does anyone have any questions so far? Let me know if you have any questions along the way. Some benefits of boundaries. There's many, but hi, Diane. Thank you so much for being here. For one, boundaries we can look at as a self-care practice, or what I've started kind of shifting the language around a little bit is, when I think of self-care, I know it's a buzzword, so I really want to emphasize the importance of self-care. It's more than just like sprinkling it on every once in a while. So the way I look at it is, I classify it in the same way, with the same amount of importance and weight as I would to showering every day and taking care of my physical hygiene. I call it hygiene. Mental hygiene, emotional hygiene, physical hygiene, spiritual hygiene. I feel like I'm missing one. If you think of it, you can feel free to fill me in. But it adds extra oomph and importance to it, right? We prioritize taking care of ourselves. So this, And I understand that sometimes we go through seasons of life. I've been through them myself, where showering is sometimes, if I get showered that day, that's a win. But when we are in this space where we have greater capacity, we can see these other practices with the same importance and priority as we would having a shower every day, brushing our teeth, eating. So it is, boundaries is part of our self-care, part of our emotional, mental hygiene, because when we don't have them, people walk all over us. So we have to have them. They protect us from overextension, right? When we cannot say no, we say yes to everything. We say yes to the shoulds. We burn ourselves out. There has to be a line where we say, I have enough on my plate. I'm not putting anything else on, or it's going to collapse and shatter. So important. They also help us to define roles between ourselves, with ourselves, between ourselves and others, expectations that we have with ourselves and with others, and also appropriate and inappropriate behaviors in our relationships. This builds the entire structure around how we show up in our own life and support ourselves, and how we show up and foster and build and nourish our relationships with others. It is the foundation. It also helps us in how we communicate our needs to others. If we don't tell someone that we need something, we can't expect them to fulfill it. It helps us to create healthy relationships. Like I said, it really is one of those foundational pieces. We have to know where we're comfortable, like just where those lines are. And it's a way to feel safe. Margot says, I feel free now that I've learned to set boundaries. It will set you free. It's one of those things that I think we struggle with the most. And I know there was some comments in the chat, and this applies to everyone, but there was a few women kind of chit-chatting about the societal pressure of like being a good mom and being a good wife and always saying yes to all the things. But I think what we're learning, in society is moving in, I think, the right direction with this and breaking these things down. It's not sustainable, especially now that we're out working and we can't balance it all. Some of these societal structures were based around the expectation that women would be home raising the children and not also working like a 40+ hour work week, right? So I just want to remind you of that. You're doing an amazing job. We're going to chat about a few consequences of weak or porous boundaries. What can happen, either long-term or short-term, when we do not have healthy, strong boundaries. But like I mentioned before, we can experience burnout. We don't say no to anything. We can't do it all. We simply cannot. Not knowing when or how to say no. We have to teach ourselves these things. I know it's nice that we're starting to have more conversations around this. I hope that we can teach the future generations and stuff how to kind of learn boundaries. But there's a lot of generations in this group that, well, not a lot, but there's, a few generations in this group that just, it's not how we were raised. We were raised to people please. We were raised to make others feel comfortable above our own comfortability. And this is where we're abandoning ourselves. Prioritizing others over ourselves, like I mentioned before. People pleasing. I'll say it again. I'll say it a million times. Consequences of weak boundaries. People pleasing. Yeah. Margot says it's sad I'm 69 and learning all of this in the last year. but you're learning it, and it'll change. It's already changed your life, right? So you can kind of take the cuffs off, free yourself, and move forward in a way that serves you. Superhero syndrome, doing it all. Growing up, one sec. Excuse me. Growing up, I took a lot of pride in being the friend that everyone came to. And it's not that I don't like being that friend, but I had very porous boundaries around it. I would drop everything and run, and some of my friends took advantage of that, right? Not everyone understood my intention around it. And I have to say, even within that, with every behavior that we have, there's always a deeper intention. There's always something that we're benefiting from it, even if it's, say, like a poor behavior. I'm going off a little bit with this, but like, intention creates its own fulfillment. So even if our intention might not be, it might, I don't know, how do I want to say this? Just give me a moment. Like, I wanted to help people. I've always wanted to help people. And that's where that desire comes from, right? It's an inner, like, I feel it inside, and it pours out of me. It's who I am. But at the same time, there was a piece inside of me that felt rejected, that lacked self-worth. And one way that I could fulfill that piece of me was reaching outside of myself and saving people, and getting the validation from others. And that's where eventually down the road, I realized that I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And I was attracting and supporting people who didn't respect me, or they didn't respect my heart, right? Hands up if you've had that. I think there's a lot of us in here. I think that if you're in here, you're like this. So it comes down to, we can help people, but we have to make sure that it's from a place of overflow and not should. That was just like a whole other tangent. We can, with weak boundaries, we can have unrealistic expectations. Now, when I think of that, I think of one of the posts that I did. I can't remember the exact words around it. But to summarize, it's basically, just need a breath. When we don't tell people where we stand, like, I will be the first to put my hands up, and there's never any shame here in this space. I hope nobody ever feels shame. If you feel triggered, that's totally normal, and we're gonna dive into that next month, as I said. But I think just having these conversations, it's like, yeah, and that's okay. We're human. It's part of our makeup. But when I can tell you from my own experience, I have expected things of others that I did not express, I did not relay or speak up about. And then when they did not fulfill my expectations that they didn't know about, I was disappointed in them, or I was frustrated with them. Anyone have experienced that? Yeah. So it's one of those things. And this is where, when we do those things, someone disappoints us, and it's like, did you tell them that you wanted them to do this, or you expected this? If you didn't, is it really fair that we get upset about something they didn't know about? And I can also say, I've been on the receiving end of that too, right? I think we all have, because we all do it. when you're just like, whoa, what are you so upset about? I didn't know. Right. So it's having that awareness. And then lastly, the last thing about having weak boundaries is the resentment. So that plays into all like everything else, right? We can resent people because they're not treating us how we think they should be treating us, but we're not telling them how to treat us. Like my mom says, she taught me this just a little over a decade ago, probably around 2010, when I was kind of coming out of college and we went through like a big family life event. And she started telling me, we teach people how to treat us. And I was like, whoa, it didn't really click at first until I started kind of doing more of the personal development. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, we teach people how to treat us with what we say or don't say. So here's a few areas where we need boundaries. And these are just different facets of our life. Family, of course, it might be the most important. Who's with me with that? Work, romance, partnerships, friendships, as I talked about before. And then a couple maybe less common, but technology. We definitely need boundaries around technology. If I didn't have a boundary around technology, I would watch Grey's all night and go to work on no sleep. So there's one. And then lastly, but I would say most importantly, because everything starts here, is with ourselves. We have to know ourselves. And then it again, it pours from inside to outside. Once we understand our values and our self-worth and stuff like that, it makes it so much easier to then apply it on the outside. And then inside all of these facets, wherever all of the places that we put our boundaries, the types of boundaries within those can include physical boundaries, sexual boundaries, intellectual boundaries, emotional boundaries, material boundaries, and even time boundaries. Let me know if that's hitting. Are you having any aha moments? Feel free to comment. Excuse me. I feel like when I say the powerful stuff, I just like stuff bubbles up. So I'm trying to be subtle. Okay. Ways to set boundaries. I got two things for you, and we'll dive a little deeper after. One, we must communicate our boundaries, because if we don't speak our boundaries, we can't expect people to follow them. And number two, after we've spoken our boundaries, we have to take action on them. This is just as important as speaking our boundary. We have to follow through. We have to be unwavering in a boundary setting. And one example I can give, I'm not a mom myself, but I have put many kiddos to bed and stuff like this, and babysat and spent lots of time with kids. Kids thrive on boundaries. Oh my goodness, they love boundaries. They try to push them sometimes as part of their learning and development, but they thrive on boundaries. Oh my goodness, so much. When you think about, here's like, I guess a general example. You're putting a kid to bed and you're saying like 5 more minutes. You got 5 more minutes to play outside or do this or do that. And 5 minutes is up. What are they going to do? They're going to ask you for 5 more minutes, aren't they? Or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it is. And, maybe in some circumstances, you could give them a couple more minutes, but that starts to be a slippery slope, right? Because once you've spoken the boundary, it's like, well, it's been 5 minutes. And especially if there's any sort of time management that's required. So I'll give an example. When I used to babysit twin boys, and this was when Snapchat came out, was first out, and it had super fun, well, it still has the super funny filters and stuff. And they would want to do Snapchat funny videos or filters, or one thing that I helped them work through, and they still bring it up when I see them, is they were really afraid of thunder and lightning. So I had an idea. I wanted to try to, I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm just going to go with it. I was trying to get them comfortable with the idea while keeping them safe, but also helping them to understand the safety around it. Like, we're not going to go run out into the street and dance in the rain when there's thunder and lightning. Of course, we're going to be inside where we're safe. So what I did is I looked up videos on YouTube on my phone of lightning hitting planes. And you know what? They loved it. They wanted to see the lightning hitting the plane. So it seemed to kind of work for them. They were like, oh, okay, well, the plane's still okay. And I said, it's like us. We're in the house. We're safe. There's things that we can do. So we know that if we hear thunder or we see lightning and we're outside, we're going to come inside. But then we're safe. And they loved seeing those videos. So at bedtime, they would say, can we see the plane videos? And I would say, well, we've got your bedtime's in this amount of minutes. So these are the things you need to do before bed. You need to brush your teeth. You need to get your jammies on. If we had to have a bath, there was that. And it would be usually a choice between, like, are we going to read a book? Are we going to watch the videos? Or are we going to do Snapchat? And depending on how much time we had, it's like, oh, we could spend 5 minutes doing this, 5 minutes doing that. But I said, but you have to have your teeth, you have to have the things that you have done finished before we do any of that. And if you dawdle, you're gonna use up your own time. And I was consistent. This is the action part of, like, if they ended up having a rough night or something and they weren't cooperating and stuff, it's like, I'm so sorry, but I told you we had 10 minutes. And I would usually, because they couldn't tell time at the time, I would kind of give them, like, okay, now we're down to 5 minutes, and a bit of a countdown. So I was just trying to make it, I can't think of the right word, more, I don't know, understandable, I guess. But I stuck to my guns about it. And it's like, this is how we learn time management. This is how we understand boundaries. And if I were to just throw it all out the window every time, they would never listen to me, right? They would just be like, meh, she'll give me 5 more minutes. She'll give me 10 more minutes. We'll go to bed late. Our parents will be home before we're in bed. So this is just a long way around of giving an example of why it's so important to not only speak the boundary, but to follow up and follow through with it. Because if we don't make sure that the boundary is followed, nobody's going to follow it. Why would they? Right? We have to make it known how important it is that we do this. So, having said that, let's chit chat a little bit about common responses to boundaries. Hands up if you are a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser. I think if we're people pleasers, we're always a little bit recovering, because it's just something we just have to be aware of. So there's still times I catch myself being like, I'm not going to go down that road, but almost did. Or I'm starting to go down that road, need to turn back. So there's no judgment or shame around that. But hands up if you're a people pleaser and you want to start using your boundaries more, being aware of them, or you've started and things are happening. So these are common responses to boundaries that we set with others. It could be with ourselves too, now that I think about it. And let me know if you agree once I go through this, if it could maybe apply to us as well. I think it's always a mirror, right? How we treat ourselves, how others treat us, how we treat others. First thing is push back. Because like I said in that post, and it's not my quote, the people who resist our boundaries the most are the ones who benefited the most from our lack of boundaries. I'm going to say that again. The people who resist our boundaries the most are the ones who benefited the most from our lack of boundaries, from us not having them. So they're gonna push back because they're feeling or seeing, they might not even be super conscious of it, especially if it's not like this really hard line. It's just like, you're like, no, I gotta leave by this time. And normally you'd be more flexible on it. It might not be a big light bulb moment of realization at first, because there's lots of different types of boundaries, right? There's big ones and small ones. But they're gonna feel a change, even if they don't like see it or think about it. There's gonna be pushback. They're gonna be like, oh, well, I thought you could just do this. And it's like, no, I said I had to be here by this time. They will test your limits. Children, that's when I think about testing limits, I think of children, but it can apply to anyone. But certainly when you start to place a boundary on a child that they don't have before, they are going to explore the heck out of it to see if they can find any holes. So if you want really good practice boundaries with children, especially if they're going through a developmental phase that's very like a growth in development. They'll be all over that. They're gonna see if you're really serious about that boundary. I love kids. Don't get me wrong. I say it with so much love. Ignoring. They might fully dismiss or ignore your boundaries because they don't accept it, because it's a new you. It's a new behavior pattern. And we have to teach them how to treat us. We have to be like, no, this is the new thing. This is what we're going for. And we have to be consistent with us. Hey, mom, we have to be consistent with it until it's a new learned behavior and acceptance from them as well. And the last one, defensiveness. It all plays in together, right? Actually, sorry, I have a couple more. Rationalizing and questioning. They might question you about it. Are you sure about that? Or why all of a sudden are you doing this? Or I thought you would do this. Or, I mean, there's a million responses, but they might give you the silent treatment. Again, that goes along with the ignoring and just dismissing this new boundary you've put in place. They might ghost you, or they might accept it. If they have healthy boundaries, they'll be like, good for you. Right? Who has set a boundary and someone very supportive in your life has said, good job. I've been waiting for you to do that. Or I'm so glad you set that boundary. I'm so glad you stuck up for yourself. Right? We have those cheerleaders in our lives too, that are on the sidelines and maybe noticing where we're struggling. And when they see us like stand up for ourselves, they're like, whew, you go, girl. I'll always be your cheerleader if you tell me about a boundary you set. So now let's get into boundary statements. These are things that we can say that help us to establish boundaries. There's 3. First one is I want. You're expressing a need. Second one is I need. I want you to be home by this time. I need you to take out the garbage tonight. Third one, I expect. I expect you to be home at this time, or I expect your homework to be done by the time I check in with you again. They're kind of simple yet powerful statements because it's very clear, right? The most important thing about boundaries is clear communication. When we're unwavering in the way that we communicate them, there's no wiggle room. Speak it fully. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I'm just going to take a drink of water for a moment. We're doing well. think I had a couple of these slides mixed up. Okay. Before we get into an integration practice, I love doing these things together because then it kind of makes it tangible, right? Instead of just talking the theory, let's actually like work through something together, whether it's live or on the replay, because this is how we can have an intention, but we have to start walking towards it, right? So the last thing I want to talk about before we do the integration is how to communicate a boundary. I talked about 3 statements that we can start. I want, I need, I expect. But this is kind of the all-encompassing around those statements. And some of them I've already kind of talked a little bit about. The first one being be clear. Make sure that the boundary is very set. I can tell you just one from childhood. My mom's listening. But it's like, be home by the time the streetlights come on. So it wasn't necessarily a specific time, but holy crap, if we weren't paying attention and those streetlights came on, we were booking it for home. So it's just, it can be simple, but it's like, oh crap, I need to be home right now. So just be clear. If you have to give them a time, if you like, whatever that may be, with your kids, with your partner, with a friend, like I can meet up with you, but I have to leave by this time because I have this other appointment. So if you get chit chatting, you can look at your watch because, hey, you told them you had to head out by this time. There's really like, what more is there to say about it, right? And if they do push back, it's like, well, I told you I had to leave by this time, and just be at peace with it. The more at peace you can be with your boundaries, the more you know that you've really embodied and integrated it. And there's no need to argue because it is the way it is. Number 2, directly state your need. Again, being clear, your request, or saying no. If a boundary is oftentimes a no when someone asks you to take something on, or, do something you don't want to do, whatever that may be. Just no, I'm sorry. I'm not available for that. I don't have time, and I don't have time today. I have, other things I need to do. And you know what? Realistically, you don't need to always justify it. I think as people pleasers, we always feel like we have to like tell the whole long story of why we can't do the thing because we feel guilty about it. But it can be as simple as I'm not available to do that today, or I don't have time for that. If it's something you do want to help them with, then it's like, well, would you be free tomorrow? Or, whenever your calendar kind of allows. You can look at other options, but it's a clear, like, this isn't working. This is not fitting in my day today. And then 3rd, hugging all the people pleasers in here. All the people that struggle with setting boundaries and maintaining them. Deal with the discomfort of setting the boundary. There is going to be some guilt. There might be some shame, because at that point you're taking actions that start to move you into a new identity. Because when we think about it, we previously have seen ourselves as someone who takes on too many things, helps everyone out, is the hero. And then when we start to put a boundary up, draw a line in the sand, all of a sudden, like, who are we, right? There's going to be some discomfort because it's something, especially if we've done it all our lives, right? We've done it for decades. It's scary when we start to challenge our own identity, really. So this is when it's fully normal, as I've said, but this is when, if you need a little bit extra support for yourself, that's when some of those like I say, care, hygiene, those self-care, those emotional tool belt. So I call it a soul tool belt. That's my term. That's my term for it. But those practices that just kind of help us to thrive. And if we're going into somewhere that we know we need to go, but it's super uncomfortable because we've never done it before and there's a reason we've never done it, what can we do to support ourselves a little bit, make it a little bit easier to transition? Because once we do, and that becomes our norm, we move into this kind of new identity. Then we become the person who knows how to set boundaries, who feels sure of themselves, who is unwavering in their values and how they show up in the world and how they treat themselves and how they allow others to treat them. It's a beautiful thing. I didn't say it was easy though. Who's with me? So we're going to do a little integration practice. I'm going to take another drink. You know what? I'm going to mute for a second and like blow my nose. Just give me one moment. I'm like struggling here. Thank you so much. Okay. I feel like I can breathe again. So if you caught the last masterclass on people pleasing, we're going to do kind of the same thing. I questioned if, I should do it, but I thought, you know what? Anything that I've learned and integrated in my life, I've done multiple times. And when I think of my first mentor, there's certain things that she says on repeat. And I didn't get first 7 or 8 times. It took a few times before it just kind of became normal and like something that I do or something that I believe. So there will be I think there's going to be certain things going forward that it's like, I'm going to bring some of these same tools into different learnings, because it carries us through different facets. Is that the right word? So the first thing that we're going to do is explore what a yes and a no feels like in our body. And if you remember this one, feel free to put in the chat how that felt and what you experienced. It is important, in my opinion, for changing patterns, because this is how we stay true to ourselves and our authenticity. And we really, I'm trying to think of the right word, unwavering, but just, maybe that's the word. This is how we're just strong, and we come into our own. Yeah, that's where I want to go. And when we can feel the difference between a yes and no, that makes it easy to know when to say no. We know the difference then between something that we have the desire because it feels like a yes inside of our body and we want to give. And even sometimes when we want to give, we still, I guess one thing I didn't mention is we still have to have boundaries for ourselves, in that we don't have to do it all. We have a checklist. I think especially as women too, we feel this pressure, like we got to do all the things. I mean, is anyone going to die if the dishes stay in the sink overnight? I know it's a hard one. A lot of people struggle with this. It's all good. Like I said, no shame, no judgment. But at the end of the day, if it's like really, excuse me, detrimental, and it's going to keep us from doing something we need to do, like showering, let's not forfeit a shower before bed, or whatever our routine is, so that we have no dishes in the sink. If dishes in the sink is really one of those things that brings you peace and joy before you go to bed, maybe there's something else on the list that can be put to the bottom. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's excuse me, there's a time when we just have to evaluate what can wait till tomorrow. Like, is it really a fire to be put out? Can I do it tomorrow? Ask yourself those things. And I was very rigid for a long time about like, oh, I have to do that. My mom will vouch for me. I take on so much. And now I'm starting to look at it and go, do I have to though? Or am I just deciding that for myself? And is it serving me? Does it make me feel stressed out? Can it wait till tomorrow or when I have like a chance? Keep it on the list so don't forget about it, but does it have to be done right now? And then we can evaluate it. Will it feel good to get it done if I spend a few more minutes? Or does it does it feel like a should and just like, that's when we say, when can I do it? And that can give you some relief too of, I feel like I should do it. I'm gonna let it go. But hey, maybe I got time on Tuesday. And then that can give you a little relief. You know that you're gonna do it, and maybe you've picked a day. Let me know if you feel any of that. I speak this stuff because I have put a lot of pressure on myself for a lot of years. Both my parents have said, like, you gotta slow down. And they're right. I finally started listening in my probably late 20s. Okay, so we're gonna take a moment. Just take a couple breaths again. Come back into your body. Hand over heart if you want to feel it more somatically. Nice big breath. Hold it a little bit at the top and then blow it out. Feel the release. Feel your shoulders. Feel your shoulders drop. Feel your jaw relax. I want us to come right back into our body. We have to feel those sensations. That's how we tune in. When we are stuck in our squirrel mind, that racing thoughts of all the things we have to do, all of the, expectations we put on ourselves, all the pressure, we cannot hear and listen to our body when we're stuck in our head. So we're going to come back into our body, a couple breaths. Let me know how you feel after. And just release it. If you have to shake it out a little bit, feel free. One more big deep breath. Okay. So you can keep your eyes closed if you want, especially if that helps you kind of tune inward a little bit more. And we're just going to, I'm going to say a statement to you as if you were in front of me, and tell me how you feel. I'm getting in my head for it. Just give me one moment. Sometimes I trip myself up still. Your name is Betty. How does that feel? If I were to tell you your name is Betty. What's kind of the sensation that you get in your body? Feel free to pop it in the comments. Now, if I were to turn around and say your actual name, which it's going to be different because we have people live and there's going to be people replaying, but think of your own name. And then I look at you and say, your name is, and then I use your name. Do you feel a difference there? How does it feel? When I tell you something truthful about yourself versus if I tell you something that's not true. You can do this practice on yourself too, right? You can think of truths and lies. It's a little bit harder for me live because I'm not like in front of you and I can't say things that I know about you specifically since there's a few of us in here, but tell me if this hits for you. When I tell you something truthful about yourself, I think we've got all women in here. So you are a woman. Does it make you feel kind of, I guess the word I would use is like expansive? You're like, yeah, I'm a woman. And you can kind of like, that's the best word I can use is expansive. Whereas if I looked at you and said, you're a man, you'd be like, no, right? If you identify as a woman, that's not going to feel good for you. Same as if there's a man watching the replay and I say you're a woman and you identify as a man. So for me, the words that I would use to describe these sensations in my body are expansive for a yes and contraction for no. When someone tells a lie about you, and this is when we get triggered, right? Like when you think of something that's maybe triggered you recently, and it's just like immediately your body just kind of, at least for me, my body just kind of constricts, and I'm like, no, that's not true, right? And we get kind of tensed up and just like kind of like come inward because it's almost like a protection. Whereas when someone says something like, you are beautiful, you are loved, someone loves you. When someone tells you that, it's like, like you're blossoming. Does that make sense? Is that a good way to put it? Like you're blossoming when someone says, I love you. You are loved. You bring value to this world. It's like, you know? So next, we're gonna keep moving because I don't want to take too much of your time, but now that we've established what a yes and a no feels like this will guide you through life in so many ways. We talked about it with people pleasing, and we're talking about it with boundaries, and maybe we'll talk about it in the next masterclass. I'm not sure yet, but I want to say the next step is to visualize, close your eyes, and visualize a place where you need to set a boundary. Where in your life, we talked about the different facets, right? Family, work, relationships, partnerships, technology, ourselves, time. No, time was one of the kind of like sub ones. Think about a place where you need to set a boundary. You can share it if you want, or you can keep it yourself. I'll give it just a few seconds. And the other thing I really encourage is when we get back into our body, we can start to listen to the signals. Things will come to us. We get those intuitive hits. Our body will tell us. So whatever comes to your mind first, Go with it before the ego, the squirrel brain shuts it down. Go with that first inkling, that first thing when I said visualize a place, you need to set a boundary. What came to mind first? Go with that. You don't have to put it in the comments if you don't want to. Next, based on what we've talked about this evening, again, keeping your eyes closed, visualize yourself setting the boundary. If you are setting the boundary with someone, imagine yourself having this conversation with them. Are you sitting at a table? Are you out for a walk? Are you in the car with them? Where are you? And just picture yourself setting this boundary. What do you need to say to them? How are you going to communicate this boundary? What words are you going to use to express what you need, what you expect, or what you want? And just take a moment there. And it can look however it comes to you. Just trust that. And notice how it feels in your body. Does it feel like a release or like a relief? Could be either. Do you start to feel that discomfort of like, who am I instead of boundary? I'm not someone who sets boundaries. Do you feel a little uncomfortable? If you do, that's okay. But just start to be mindful of the sensations you feel in your body. Because right now, we're not even doing it in real life. We're just imagining, kind of setting ourselves up, right? For what's to come. And then lastly, we're going to support our nervous system. This is at the root of all of it, right? So if we're feeling a little bit of discomfort, why don't you give yourself a little squeeze or your hand over your heart, right? Connect even deeper into your body. Tell yourself, I am safe. And one thing I really want to stress as well is, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, it might have been in one of my posts too. Boundaries are not only for ourselves, they're for others too, right? Because I personally like when people set boundaries for with me, because then I know where I stand in my relationship or my friendship with them. I know what going too far looks like, or where to kind of stop with things, or however that looks like. So what do you need to support your nervous system if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable? Hand over heart, feel your heartbeat, and give yourself a little hug. Remind yourself that you're safe and that you are worthy of setting boundaries, and that people who love and support you will benefit from these new boundaries. I want us to really put emphasis on that. We're not the only ones who benefit from boundaries. And then when you kind of feel good about it, you're like, you gave yourself a little hug. You can picture yourself giving your younger self a hug, that younger version of you, that inner child who was afraid to speak up. If she's bubbling up to the surface, or he, depending on who's watching, tell that younger version of yourself, you're safe, I got you. My prefrontal cortex is fully developed now. And I have the ability to stand up for us, and I'm going to. And you're good. I got your back. Give them a hug. You got them. Feel how good that feels. And then just kind of come back to the present moment if you've drifted off a little bit. This is kind of turned into a bit of a meditation, I think. I feel like I should re-record this a little bit more guided. This was unscripted. Well, as with everything else, but I would love to know if you have a comment. We're gonna finish up here because I have gone over the hour, but as I'm finishing up, feel free to provide any feedback if you feel comfortable sharing. I love the back and forth. It definitely serves it feeds me. Thank you, Margot. She says this was absolutely wonderful. This is the work. When people talk about doing the work, this is the work. This is part of it. But it doesn't have to be super wild and scary. We can do it in a loving, nourishing way, especially when we have someone to lead us through it. So does anyone have any questions? That's the first thing. Feel free to let me know any hits that you had while we kind of walked through that visualization and that integration practice. And feel free to do this on your own anytime. I like to give you tools that you can take away. You can re-listen to the replay if you want me to guide you through it. I might record one, or you can do it on your own in your own version. You just, the main points, make sure you go through those and you can guide yourself. That's super beautiful. In terms of what's next, next month, our masterclass is called Jolted. It's about triggers. I did create an event. I think I did it yesterday. It's going to be September 7th at 8 p.m. inside this group, of course. We're going to talk about triggers. What are triggers? Oh my gosh, that's another deep topic. I love, triggers are just like, they're such a thing, right? And they can be so destructive to our lives. So we're going to break it down and we're going to start to maybe move through some or have a better understanding of them so we can pick them out. So that's the next free class. What else do we have? The self-study still available. I just have it available. So anytime, if you haven't done it used to be called the 5-week mindful meditation series. It's now called Create Your Calm. And some of those foundational learnings and practices that can kind of help to support our nervous system and just life learning. We talk about attachment and surrender. That's a huge one. Life-changing for me. So I took some of the most transformative lessons and understanding and the wisdom that I received from going through these hard times, and I've put them into a course. So it's self-study. It's all in a Facebook group. There's recordings and stuff. And then you get a 30-minute coaching call with me after you've completed the 5 modules. And we can kind of break it down where do you have questions or how can we help you move forward? That's $111. It's available now. I finally have everything recorded and stuff. There's meditations recorded on the side, so you can have just the meditation. The original 5-week, it was built into the modules. So this one, you have it all by itself. So if you just want to listen to a meditation on repeat, or it's just easy to grab. So if you're interested in that, just send me a message and I'll get you hooked up. I also do intuitive, like oracle card readings. So if you're interested in that, they're $30. I basically tune in. I get into my own body. I see what guidance you might need. You could ask a question, not to me, just set your own intention. And then I say, like, what does this person need to know for their highest good, most amount of healing? I pull cards and then I send you a little reading, and it's just, they're meant to kind of uplift and inspire and give you something to be directional or mindful about. That's what these are for. I do my own card readings. I've been doing them for years, and man, they help me in my daily life. So those are the 3 things. Sorry, I'm like stuttering. My masterclass, self-study, and the oracle card readings. I'm starting to kind of build this group up a little bit more. If there's other topics that you're interested in, feel free to pop them in the group. I'll do another poll at some point when we kind of start to go through the current topics, but feel free to add one in there. I'm always open for suggestions, and yeah, I've got some good stuff coming through. I don't fully have the words to describe the session that I had a week ago today and how healing and transformative was for me. I feel like I have shed the weight of an entirely whole person through me, and I feel like I finally see the light. I've been trying to navigate the dark for the last year, and I see glimpses of light, and I hold on to it, and I won't get too much into it, but I just want to say that this work is life-changing, and I feel like there's 13 years of stuff that has made me question my sanity in a lot of ways that has finally released, and I feel like I can show up to a greater capacity, not for myself, for my loved ones, inside of these online groups. And I can't wait to see what the next version of the Living on Lemonade group is. I have some ideas, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, you can find me inside the group and reach out if you have any questions. So take it easy, friends. I'm sending you so much love, so much hugs, and like extra big hug for showing up and doing this work. You are brave. I'm proud of you, and I love you all so much, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for spending time with me, and take care. All right. Good night, everyone.